So, what can we say about Krampus? I mean, there's just so many interesting things about Krampus, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history, where it comes from, why did it suddenly become so popular here in North America? Because it's another thing that's gotten appropriated by the culture of North America. Uh,
It has. Yep.
It has, it totally has. So we're going to talk about that too, because I want to talk about how people in Germany feel about that. And there's various types of Krampus, and they're not all called Krampus. We should sort of begin by saying Krampus is a German word, and it actually means claw. So it's based on the claw of Krampus. And Krampus, of course, depending on which depiction you see, it's he's got horns. See, look, mine are like movable. Hey, I don't think Krampus can move his horns. Maybe he can. I don't know. But there's male Krampus. There's, for the most part, Krampus gets depicted as male. But when we get into the Victorian era, and we start to see postcards and Christmas greetings and things coming out, we start to see female versions of Krampus as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. So Ian, did you go down the rabbit hole on Krampus for this week's show?
I did a little bit. It's interesting that you mentioned right off the top about the German folklore.
Mm-hmm. Oh, German hat.
Because what's that?
Where's your hat? You were going to wear your
my little German hat. Should I put that on?
Yes, put it on for the show.
My little German hat.
Because if I'm wearing horns, you can put on the hat. There we go.
There we go. Right. My little German hat.
There we go. We're
so,
set.
As I said, it's interesting that you mentioned the German folklore. Even though Krampus is a much more broader European thing.
Origin, yes.
Yeah. And it's interesting because my very first exposure, if you want to call it that, to Krampus, or my first education of him, when I was a kid, there was a German family that lived across the street from us, and our two families were very close. And in the German culture, Christmas Eve, December 24th, is much more relevant to them rather than Christmas Day, December 25th. They, at least for our friends across the street. Mm-hmm. And so they celebrated their Christmas on Christmas Eve.
Yes, Christmas Eve.
And because our families were so close, they invited us over every Christmas Eve to celebrate Christmas Eve with them. And that was my first introduction to the Krampus story, because for me, as a young Canadian boy, for me it was Santa Claus.
Mm-hmm.
For the daughters of this German family, of course, for them it was
rolling that out of the screen. I'm like, what's that doing there?
For them, it wasn't Santa Claus, it was Krampus. So that was my first real interaction with the whole Krampus story. And of course, I didn't really understand it.
No,
just being a little kid, but that was my first sort of down the rabbit hole
adventure to Krampus land.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's interesting because at the end of the day, like I say, depending on where you are in Europe, essentially, it has different names. It also has different times of the year that it kind of comes around. So, we're going to sort of stick to what people know today, the German version of Krampus, right? We'll talk about some of the other stuff, but I kind of want to talk about it because Krampus has a number of sort of stories behind it. And Krampusnacht, or Krampus night, is actually on December the 5th, right? We have December the December time. And so it's actually pre the Christian celebration of the holidays, essentially, right? So we have the folklore sort of talking about Krampus. And what exactly was Krampus? Well, I mean, in Germany, they don't really do Santa Claus either. It's St. Nicholas Day, right? So St. Nicholas Day is December the 6th. And that is when, the children would go to see outside their door if they'd been left a shoe or a boot the night before with presents in it. And so in reality, Krampus would come the prior night to this event and collect up all the naughty children and cart them off. And they would be, either given the rod or here we go. Did we see that? That was my, by the way. It was,
I don't look anything like it.
No, you don't. It wasn't him. It was just him putting that in front of the screen. But so we have the idea of a way to keep kids in check. So much like we say, oh, Santa's not going to give you anything if you're bad, right? But there's really no consequence to Santa not giving you anything. You're just not getting things. You would maybe
for the naughty children, Santa won't give it to you, but Krampus sure will.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, there's a number of stories, and I kind of really like too in Finland. They have a similar story, only it's, Santa there is a little bit of the combination of both because he has horns, just like this, right? And
the Finnish Santa.
But there's a Finnish Santa, right? And again, it's kind of a cross between what we would think of Santa Claus and Krampus together, but it's not really considered either or. It's sort of its own thing. There's a really great movie, and if you haven't seen it, it's a Finnish film, and it's called Rare Exports. It's really fun. It's a great, this sort of Yule time, Christmas time movie with the original origins of Santa Claus.
No, I haven't seen that.
Check it out. It's really good. It's subtitled, but for the most part, a good portion of it is in English. And you get the odd Finnish and the odd Russian, in there because of the border between Finland and Russia. But it's a really good film. It's a really fun film, and it's kind of family friendly for the most part. The hero of the story is a young boy, but I'll leave it at that. But it's called Rare Exports, and it's a really great. It's one of my favorite films to watch. Like forget about Miracle on 34th Street or this one's just really, really fun. So, but it kind of goes back to that origin of their original idea. And of course, their idea has big horns. Look, my horns just don't want to stay on my head today.
Well, as far as Krampus goes, that movie is obviously a lot better than the one that I saw.
Oh, the horror movie, Krampus? Yeah.
Oh, the one that I saw, it was made back in 2015.
Yeah,
it was released it was the big Hollywood version released by Universal Studios.
Yeah.
And it is.
I haven't seen it because I just.
Oh, you don't want to. It's the most stupid movie I've ever seen in my life. It started out really good. The first maybe 15, 20 minutes, there's some very creepy, suspenseful scenes and moments in it. And then it just turned utterly ridiculous.
Oh, it's unfortunate.
And it's like, oh.
Yeah, it's I don't know what it is. I mean, it's again, it's a cultural appropriation thing because people are taking the idea and the concept and they bring it over here and they sort of turn it into something that it isn't. And it's unfortunate. And, it's even nowadays, like, I mean, my background, my family, we're fairly mixed. My grandmother's family's from Germany originally, but other than that, we're Scottish and Scandinavian because isn't everybody over there? But, we kind of looked at, I sort of looked at my upbringing we celebrated Christmas, sort of. It was kind of weird. My grandfather was not a religious person, and we lived with him. So we didn't really celebrate in the same way, but we had a lot of stories that were more macabre, ghost stories, or some like monster tales, that kind of Scottish creatures.
Mhm.
And my grandmother mentioned that her brother used to like to talk about, the Krampus sort of thing to the family when they were young growing up. So it's sort of an interesting play on how it's made its way over here, and it's become hugely popular. I mean, even in New Orleans now, they have a Krampus crew,
Oh,
and they
really?
do a Krampus parade. Yeah,
Because I
I'm not
know
sure
it's
how it started.
hugely popular over in Europe that they have parades
Oh,
everywhere.
yes. Yeah, they do. And I think some of the best ones come out of Austria. There's some phenomenal parades in Austria and in Vienna every year. And I did put a little teaser there from the 2010 one, which I think was just the best video capture of it. There's lots of them out there from different years, but that one, the person who was actually filming it was right in the parade, obviously. So they were
Hmm.
in the same, and so I just found the perspective was, and it was just such a perfect sort of magical night, because it was snowing and you had all of these, Krampus and these, the old horse-drawn hearses and the fire and all. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, it just really has sort of this strange magical. And I really liked watching it too, because I liked watching the creatures going up to the kids in the crowd, and you didn't see any kids screaming or terrified, or you know, some kids were like wanting to touch their faces, or there's a couple of kids that looked a little unsure, but for the most part, like I can't even imagine kids here, if they would be screaming,
Yeah.
they'd be terrified, right? But over there, because it's part of the culture and part of what it is, it's, obviously the kids grow up with the stories, and so to take part and go and see that parade is probably pretty magical as a kid. I mean, I would have just loved to see that when I was a little
Yeah.
kid. I was a weird little kid, so my brother probably would have been terrified, but me, no, I was just all for the weird stuff. But I would have loved it. But yeah, so let's kind of talk about the origins of Krampus, like, just sort of where it comes from, and, why, obviously, I mean, we can see why it's so popular. It's a terrifying sort of half goat, half demon. It's kind of horrific. It's, got the big tongue, and it's dragging chains and bells and shaking them, and, birch sticks to swat naughty children with. And a lot of them are carrying a sack that they would, take children away in,
Hmm.
the naughty children. And so in reality, it has its base in pagan beliefs, but it's now tied into Catholicism, because St. Nicholas is Catholic and he's the patron saint of children. So we now have, Krampus accompanying essentially St. Nicholas in a weird sort of way, right? And I mean, you've got all of this, and sort of the counterparts, right? Because in Germanic religions, I mean, there's Belschnickel and Rack Ruprecht, right? Black bearded man who carries switches and beats children. France has Hans Trapp and Pierre Foutard. And then there's Zwarte Piet in the Netherlands. So they're all kind of different,
It
but yet
varies from region to region.
it does. But yet they kind of still have that same duty. Their duty is to keep naughty children in line, right? And the interesting story is that, like I said before, Krampus's name kind of, it comes from the German word Krampen, and which means claw. But Krampus is said to be the son of hell in Norse mythology as well. So we have that tie in too, right?
I'd
So
read
we have,
something about that yes,
yeah,
there's some Norwegian legend that
well, it's hell in the Norse mythology. Well, they call it mythology, right? But the Norse story, the gods, and Hel, of course, she has a son, and her son is Krampus, right? The creature that is Krampus.